School trips, usually taken at the end of term, and also known as field trips, which usually has some educational purposes. But sometimes, without the proper health and safety checks or the correct supervision, these school trips can end up in deadly consequences. Here are two stories of such incidents where a school field trip went wrong, ending in disastrous and deadly consequences. These are the stories of 11-year-old Adil Naeem and 11-year-old Bunmi Shagaya. Adil Naeem, born on the 9th of April 1985 in Feltham, London, to parents Mohammed Naeem and Ajaz Naeem, who was a computer operator at Stansted Airport. Adil had two younger siblings, a 9-year-old brother called Mohsin and a 3-year-old sister called Amna. Adil was in his final year at Feltham Hill Junior School, where he was described as popular, well-behaved and bright. Adil also had a love of playing cricket and played with the Hounslow Cricket Club. On Friday the 7th of June 1996, 47 pupils from Feltham Hill Junior School, including Adil, were taken out of the school for a fun activity day at Chalfont Heights Scout Camp in Chalfont, St Peters, Buckinghamshire. The day was for an activity day of rock climbing, archery, rifle shooting and swimming, and they were accompanied and supervised by 7 adults, which consisted of 4 teachers, a scout leader named Chris Best, and 2 other adults. The day trip was a treat for the pupils whose parents could not afford or did not want to send their children on the week-long school trip to Dorset that the other kids had gone on. And after a few of the activities, the children were taken to the pool with the intention of swimming for half an hour before going to their archery class that was to be taught by a father of 4, an archery expert, then 47-year-old Christopher Best of 7th Feltham Scouts, a volunteer Scouts leader. At the end of the swimming session, Chris Best blew his whistle to signal for the children to get out of the pool in order to get ready for their archery class. And once all the children had started making their way out of the swimming pool, someone shouted out that someone was at the bottom of the pool. And 11-year-old Adil was spotted floating lifelessly in the deep end of the pool. Adil, who was a poor swimmer, had jumped into the deep end and got into difficulties, but classmates had played on in the water, unaware of what was happening. Upon spotting Adil at the bottom of the swimming pool, after being called by the whistle to come out, classmate 11-year-old Barry Hortin went to inspect and said that at first he thought Adil was playing about. Scout leader and archery expert Chris Best called to Barry, telling him to give Adil a nudge to come up. But 11-year-old Barry said that when he pushed Adil, he did not move, so he tried to lift him up, but Adil was too heavy, so he had to let him go. Upon realising the situation and how serious it was, another of Adil's schoolmates, 11-year-old Luke Pierce, ran back into the water to help. Luke managed to lift Adil's head above the water, saying that he was going to take Adil to the side where someone could take him out. But for whatever reason, although Adil had almost been rescued, voluntary scout leader and archery expert Chris Best, who everyone assumed was in charge and was a lifeguard, stopped Luke so that he could go in and save Adil himself. 11-year-old Luke said that he did not want to let go of Adil, but Chris Best told him he had to, and so he did. The 47-year-old scout leader, Chris Best, then dived in to try to save Adil himself. But Chris Best was not the lifeguard everybody thought he was, and he was a weak swimmer. Because of this, when Chris Best jumped into the water, he got into difficulties himself and started drowning. With both Adil and scout leader at the bottom of the pool, the school children became hysterical. Of the other 6 adults that were there to supervise the school children, none of them could swim properly, and none of the supervising adults had any swimming or life-saving qualifications or skills such as CPR, and not one of them was able to swim in the deep end. Adil's classroom teacher, Claire Roberts, who was one of the supervising adults on the trip, said that she looked around the pool but did not see any adults, nor does she remember seeing any nearby. Because of the panic, no one spotted the emergency alarm nearby at the side of the pool, and the panic and hysteria continued. Glenn Bolden had been helping to set up a camp nearby, and when he heard the commotion, he ran to help. Glenn Bolden dived into the pool and scooped up Adil from the bottom of the pool. He then rescued the drowning scout leader Chris Best, who was at this point unconscious. A camp worker who saw the incident, 18-year-old Mark Jenkins, said that when Adil was pulled out of the water, he was laid on the poolside for a minute with no one trying to revive him until first aiders came. But that Chris Best, the scout leader and archery expert, was pulled out and he was revived immediately. Adil's classroom teacher, Claire Roberts, one of the supervising adults, was provided with an emergency phone to take on the trip with her by the school, but she claimed that she was unable to use the phone, but it's not clear why. When emergency services were eventually called, a doctor was flown in by helicopter from London's Whitechapel Hospital, and he battled to save Adil's life alongside paramedics. Despite their best efforts, 11-year-old Adil Naeem was pronounced dead at the scene, while scout leader Chris Best was taken to Wexham Park Hospital in Slough, where he was in a coma, fighting for his life. 3 days after Adil's death, a post-mortem was carried out on his body on Monday the 10th of June 1996, where it was determined by the coroner that Adil had drowned. Adil's heartbroken family were devastated and quoted as saying, "We are not the normal people we were before. It is now absolute suffering for life." Understandably, Adil's mother, Ajaz, was said to be too upset to return to work. Adil's parents also removed Adil's 9-year-old brother, Mohsin, from the school and said that Adil's 3-year-old sister, Amna, keeps asking when her big brother will come home. Trained counsellors were on hand at Adil's school, Feltham Hill Junior School, for pupils, parents and teachers, and a bench was erected and an apple tree planted in memory of Adil Naeem, where his classmates and the school children could leave flowers. Friends and neighbours of the Naeem family rallied round and started a collection where £175 was raised. Adil's mother, Ajaz, planned to put more money towards the collection to take it up to £200, and she made an appeal to a local newspaper for people's help in donating towards the funds collected, which would then be going to the St John's Ambulance to help fund first aid courses to help prevent accidents like Adil's ever happening again, and to save another family from grief. An investigation into Adil's drowning began by police, and Sergeant Bill Snelling of Gerrards Cross Police Station began by interviewing witnesses and the campsite management. Sergeant Snelling also interviewed parents, teachers, and the 46 other students from Adil's school that had gone on the day trip, before writing up his report, which he then passed on to the coroner, health and safety executives, and environmental health officers. Hounslow Council began dealing with any media questions relating to the incident. The inquest into the death of 11-year-old Adil Naeem began 4 months after his death on Tuesday the 8th of October 1996 at Wickham Coroner's Court for a 4-day hearing, where on the first day of the inquest, the coroner and the jury visited the pool that Adil Naeem had drowned in. Adil's parents also visited the pool where their son had died, noting that not one of the safety alarms at the pool was working. There was also no safety rail around the pool, and one of the rescue poles were too small to rescue anybody. Adil's parents voiced that they felt they had been let down by the safety arrangement of the scout camp. On the second day of the inquest, all the children that had been present when Adil drowned gave their account to the jury of what they witnessed, including the 2 11-year-old classmates, Barry Hortin and Luke Pierce, who had tried to save Adil's life. A teacher who had not been on the school day trip, Richard Fife, said that Adil was not a strong swimmer and had missed 8 to 10 of his swimming lessons that year. It was said that Adil could not swim more than 2 to 3 strokes before putting his foot down on the floor and was unwilling to put his face under the water. The inquest revealed that the swimming pool had no lifeguards and a lot of fatal assumptions were made about safety provisions. The teachers at Feltham Hill Junior School said that they were not told that there wouldn't be any lifeguards when booking the trip, and that they regularly took the school children to pools in Hounslow Borough, where trained supervisors were always present, so they assumed that it would be the case on this trip. Adil's classroom teacher, Claire Roberts, telling the inquest that, "I wouldn't have let the children in the pool if I had known there wasn't a trained lifeguard." But the camp hit back at the inquest, saying that camp company guidelines do not insist on a trained lifesaver being present at the pool, and that a contract between the Scout Association and the schools, which use the outdoor centre, says that schools must provide their own lifeguards. Feltham Hill Junior School's welfare assistant, Pamela Norman, had been the one to book the trip, and said that when she had booked the trip, she was told by the manager of the Scout that she'd get suitable instructors for the activities the children required. Pamela Norton also stated that the Scout manager then told her that a swimming pool was also available, but had not mentioned anything about providing a lifeguard. She said it was taken that we would use the swimming pool, but the question of lifesavers was never mentioned. Although the trip had been booked by welfare assistant Pamela Norman, it had been jointly organised by the head teacher, Catherine Clark, alongside the head of Year 6, Marilyn Stevens, and they all stated that they had assumed that lifeguards would be provided, with the head teacher, Catherine Clark, saying, "Because the school children were going to an organised centre, I believe that the level of supervision provided by the school was at least sufficient." Whilst the head of Year 6, Marilyn Stevens, said, "I did not make a firm commitment to go swimming. The children were told to bring their swimming things. There was no discussions about lifeguards. We understood that if they had insufficient instructors, then certain or all of the activities might be withdrawn." But when questioned by the coroner about Chris Best, the Scout leader and archery expert that almost drowned himself whilst trying to rescue Adil, when asked about his ability to take the swimming group, the head of Year 6, Marilyn Stevens, said, "I just assumed that his qualifications were the same as they had been before. I assumed that all of the qualifications that were necessary had been compiled with the year before. The head of year had said that last part because Chris Best had helped the school on the same trip the year before and nothing had gone wrong, and the school had been happy with the Scout volunteers' participation. The police sergeant who had conducted the investigations into Adil's drowning, Sergeant Bill Snelling, also gave testimony at the inquest where he said, "This was the most avoidable death I have ever come across. I certainly feel that all the individuals involved have shown a varying degree of negligence, which have all contributed to the death of the boy. Simple observations of the basic rule of the education authority and common sense would have prevented this. I cannot envisage any circumstances where children would be put in a swimming pool without qualified people to supervise. There was not one person capable of swimming reasonably well in 6 foot 7 inches of water to save him." When it was the turn of the camp to give evidence at the inquest, the campsite warden, David Gibson, stated that it was the teachers that had taken the children on the day trip that had caused the emergency crew not to respond properly because the supervising teachers had failed to read the camp rulebook. In his closing verdict, the coroner, Richard Hewlett, accused Feltham Hill Primary School of organising the trip on the back of an envelope. He also said if the rules had been different, young Adil would probably be alive. One thing that would have made a difference is a lifeguard. I'm worried about the policy. I really think people should re-examine it. The coroner also stated that the several minutes it took to summon help was the difference between life and death, and that the scout leader and archery expert Chris Best, ill-fated, ill-timed and poorly conceived rescue had put an end to the life-saving operation. The coroner then said that the lifeguard policy should always be spelt out and they should always say, "We don't have a lifeguard." On Friday the 11th of October 1996, the jury at High Wycombe Coroner's Court gave a verdict of accidental death. Because of this verdict, it meant that there'd be no police prosecutions. Adil's parents were unhappy with the verdict, with Adil's mom Ajaz expressing her anger and disgust that no lifeguards were at the pool, saying, "If they had said in the school letter that there would have been no lifeguards, I do not think anybody as parents would have sent their children. I sent my boy to school fit and healthy and did not know he wasn't coming back. It makes my blood boil." Heartbreakingly, Adil's mom Ajaz said how Adil did not want to go on the school trip at first, but had changed his mind later. Ajaz said that she would like to have contact from parents of the children who was at the fateful school trip that day, as she wished that she could hear about her son's last hours. Adil's mom also said that 2 days before Adil had drowned, Adil had gone swimming with the school as part of end-of-term celebrations, and lifeguards were on duty at the pool then. Chiltern District Council, Environmental Health Department, Health and Safety executives who had attended the inquest were deciding whether to prosecute the London Borough of Hounslow, which was the borough that ran Feltham Hill Junior School, as well as prosecute the camp under the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. The Naeem family also considered taking legal action, with Adil's mother Ajaz saying, "We want justice. Justice on the grounds that parents like ourselves should feel their children are safe at school and on trips. They shouldn't suffer like I am suffering." After 11-year-old Adil's tragic drowning, all schools in Hounslow Borough were told that they would have to notify Hounslow Council of any day trips they were taking the school children on that involved swimming or other risks. Almost 2 weeks after the inquest, head teacher of Feltham Hill Junior School, Kathy Clark, wrote a letter to a local newspaper, the Middlesex Chronicle, saying that the school had introduced new and immediate measures to ensure the safety of children on school trips. These measures were an explicit proposal and an explanation of educational aims, meetings with the parents' support on a trip to discuss roles and functions. A first aider must accompany every trip. Copies of contact numbers and vital medical information of all pupils and adults on school trips are kept at school and taken on the trip. Explicit information will be sent to all parents of children on school trips from the named adult in charge, which would include an itinerary on arrival and departure times, and any specialist clothing or equipment the children might need. A risk assessment will be carried out on all venues before confirmation of booking. A ratio of 1 adult to 1 maximum of 7 children on every trip. At the mention of this part, the headmistress put in brackets, even though this occurs an excess charge which the school must meet. She continued that the school would request written evidence of the qualifications of any person who may be leading or supervising any of the school groups. And in closing, the head teacher, Kathy Clark, stated, Feltham Junior School are consistently reviewing procedures to ensure the highest standard of safety in the light of guidance from the London Borough of Hounslow. It was eventually decided to prosecute Hounslow Council and the Scout Camp, with the Scout Camp Association Secretary David Schmeldine expressing his shock at the possibility of legal action, saying, "We have been cooperating fully with Health and Safety and the Chiltern District Council inquiry since the fatality, but we were not aware of the full nature of the Council's inquiry. We have not been informed of any intent to prosecute." The case was taken to High Wycombe magistrates on Wednesday the 21st of May 1997, where both Greater London Middlesex West County Scout Council and London Borough of Hounslow admitted to failing to ensuring the safety of 11-year-old Adil Naeem. Both parties pleaded guilty, and the judge decided that the case should go to Crown Court as the matter was far too serious for Magistrates Court, as Magistrates Court could only impose a maximum fine of £20,000, whereas Crown Court could impose an unlimited fine. The case was adjourned until July the 2nd, 1997 for committal to Crown Court. At the Crown Court trial at Aylesbury Crown Court, the judge, Keith Devlin, stated that the incompetence and confusion was difficult to comprehend and that Adil's death was an accident waiting to happen. Prosecutor Keith Morton stated that Hounslow Council took no assessment of the risks and that nobody from the school was in charge of the trip and the organisation of it was fundamentally flawed. Whilst the defence, Edward Southwell, said that Feltham Hill Juniors was lulled into a false sense of security after a previously successful trip. Sentencing was adjourned until Monday the 17th of November 1997, where Judge Keith Devlin fined Hounslow Council £25,000 with an added £2,765 in costs, and the Scouts were fined £10,000 with an added £7,000 in costs. A statement from Chiltern District Council after the verdict said that the case highlighted the need to ensure that schools have clearer guidelines to follow when planning such trips, including the verification of qualifications of instructors. Outside the court, Adil's mum, Ajaz, stated that life has no price. This won't bring back my son. The Naeem family were considering launching a civil lawsuit for the death of their son, Adil Naeem.